I think it's normal for them to wear those like that here, though. Oh, hey, howdy. Welcome to the Nerdy Photographer Podcast. I'm your host, Dog Dad, Taco Destroyer, and Haiku Writer, Casey Fatchett. In addition to bringing you informative and entertaining photography info, I also go on adventures with the crew of the Starship Fibonacci. They're my hashtag nerdy photo crew. We've been hopping through parallel dimensions trying to take care of some temporal anomalies caused by Bang the Bonker being released. It's stuff that Dr. What calls reality schmeality type things. In the process, we've been learning a lot about various cultures and practices around the multiverse. Speaking of different cultures, the Nerdy Photographer Podcast is ranking on Apple Podcasts in many countries, including the United States, Canada, Poland, Great Britain, France, Australia, New Zealand, Portugal, and we are number one in the visual arts category for over 2 months in a row in the nation of St. Lucia. You know what, St. Lucia listeners? I love you. We're so huge there. I'm having t-shirts made up saying I'm huge in St. Lucia. I'm not kidding. Go to the merchandise store, get yours. In this episode, the wonderful photographer Devon Rowland is back with us on the podcast to talk about offbeat and non-traditional wedding photography. If you're interested in learning more about this particular niche of the wedding market, be sure to stick around after the break.
Snug.
Hey, no, Golden, not like that. They find that very inconsiderate. Hey, listeners, are you looking for a way to support the Nerdy Photographer or just show off your love for photography? Head over to nerdyphotographer.com and go to the merchandise section of our shop. That's right. There's merchandise. There's funny t-shirts, wall art with inspirational photography quotes, mugs for people who drink things, stickers. You take them and you stick them to other things. The kids love these. Gonna be huge. So head over to nerdyphotographer.com, click on the shop, and head to the merchandise section to get yours today. Merchandising, merchandising, merchandising.
Hey, I'm Dustin.
And I'm Steve.
And we host the Wedding Photo Hangover podcast, a lighthearted look at the vast world of wedding photography.
That's what we're doing? I thought we were making a podcast about drinking beers, flying drones.
Did you even take yours out of the box?
Coping with your post-wedding hangover, social media etiquette, and wearing moon shoes.
They're not moon shoes, Steve. They're just...
But seriously, check us out if you want to have a laugh and learn a thing or two about shooting weddings and running a wedding photography business.
You can find the Wedding Photo Hangover podcast on iTunes or wherever you get podcasts.
Hello, and welcome to the Nerdy Photographer Podcast. I am back again with Devon Rowland. Thank you for being with us, Devon.
Hey, Casey. Thanks for having me.
And today we're going to be talking about photographing offbeat or non-traditional weddings. So, Devon, how would you categorize offbeat weddings, or do they defy description?
Some of them certainly defy description or occasionally defy belief. But I think that a lot of people have an idea of a traditional wedding as, couple ceremony, oftentimes church, sometimes at the venue, reception in a ballroom, dinner, that kind of thing. And offbeat for me might include a field, might include fire performances, might include the couple saying, hey, we're going to do something a little bit weird. Are you okay with that? Which is one of my favorite sentences ever. And some years, I don't know if anyone else had this, but I had a year where I think I had 5 couples that had lightsabers, which was amazing.
That sounds really awesome. Yes, I love hearing those things when somebody says to me, we're going to do something strange. And I'm like, awesome, I'm down for that. That's totally cool. The one thing that I always tell people, I actually bring it up now when we're getting into discussions about the day of, like, what the schedule is going to be. And I'll be like, if there's something out of the ordinary that's going to happen, we need to talk about it just so that I'm ready for it. Like, exactly the same, like a fire performance, or like something like there's going to be something that is not standard. Like, it's just like, you need to tell me, because I want to be in the right place, or I want to have my team in the right place to capture it. Because there were times when people would do like things that I was just like, what? And, they had never discussed it with me. They were just like, that's just how we are.
Yep, definitely. And there's a balance to that, right? Of having to be able to capture whatever's happening, or if it's happening spontaneously, but then also, hey, it's great that your friends just planned this whole, 15-person coordinated dance routine. If someone had told me, I would have been able to be a little bit more prepared for it instead of, frantically running across a ballroom to go be in the right place.
Right. Like I did a Renaissance fair wedding and there was an entire choreographed sword fight with 12 different people, but we discussed that beforehand. That was all, we had a big talk about it. So knew where to be. And that way you can capture it. And is it happening? It's even when there's spontaneous things that are going to happen, like you want to be in the right spot.
100%. And, if people are going to be bringing out weapons, you probably want to know about that.
Yes, you definitely don't want to get stabbed. So how did you get into photographing non-traditional weddings?
That's actually where I started. So I began photographing anything and everything that I was a part of. And at that time, it was a lot of sideshow, it was a lot of belly dance, it was a lot of burlesque. My first wedding was for friends who were in the SCA, which is the Society for Creative Anachronism, which is a historical group of tens of thousands, if not hundreds, around the world who recreate different aspects of history from, I think it's anything before 1500. And so their wedding was a non-traditional event in a backyard with, I think it was sort of, they did skip the SCA time period. I think they went like 1800s wardrobe. And it was just nothing about it was normal. The standard, I do forever, etc. It was a hand fasting. So kind of started with that. And then my second wedding was also SCA folks who were belly dancers and theater folks. And they did have, okay, we're going to have, a couple different troops are doing a performance later. And it rained really hard. It was important to them that they were going to do a pagan ceremony outdoors for their wedding. And it was raining and it was raining and it was raining. And so we're sitting in a room above the garage watching the weather. And one of the groomsmen's looking at it. He's like, okay, so there's going to be a break in like an hour. So if we can wait it out, we can do the ceremony in this like 20-minute break in the rain. And so they just completely flipped it and they had the food. It was there. It was ready. They fed everyone. So everyone had food before the ceremony. There was the break in the rain. Went out. Everyone had muddy, disgusting feet. Like, I think half the people took their shoes off because it was just pointless at that point. And then the rest of the event after the ceremony outdoors was just jumping between tented setups that they had. And I think there were 3 belly dancing troops. And then later we got another break in the rain. And there were a couple of people doing fire performance of various kinds. And I still have a picture from this wedding on my website, however many years later. And it's one of my favorites. And it's a silhouette shot of the couple facing each other, and I had one of their fire breather friends breathe fire behind them, and so I used that as the silhouette. So those are kind of my baselines for non-traditional weddings.
Well, those are some pretty awesome. That's a pretty awesome place to start. But what have been some of your other favorite experiences in non-traditional weddings?
But I think at this point, I'm still more weddings in a field with a friend officiating, doing some sort of hand fasting or pagan event or something like that, versus traditional in a church setups. I think I've had one full Catholic and a couple others. But yeah, offbeat and non-traditional weddings were just sort of the community that I'd fostered as I built up photography.
So what have been some of your other favorite experiences with non-traditional events?
The lightsabers are definitely good. I did also have it was Pennsylvania, but it was New York Renaissance Fair folks who had a sort of Ren Fair fairy event in a castle. Her dress was designed with TARDIS inspiration, so it was blue with a lot of like stars and amazing, and everyone had custom made fairy wings. The couple's first dance was to the song from Shrek, and I think they actually choreographed it to mimic that. All I remember is them holding hands and spinning in circles for a while. But again, Ren Fair garb, swords, fairy wings. They had face painting from Ren Fair face painters halfway through. It was a pretty great day and pretty memorable.
Those are actually the same crowd of people who were at the wedding that I did with the sword fighting. This is the New York Red Fair crowd.
I was assuming as soon as you said that. Yeah, Rennies are a lot of fun. I will say that I love and adore them and think that they're often the kind we were talking about who plan incredible things and don't necessarily tell the photographer. And so there's a little bit of that scampering around going, okay, wait, I'm going to capture this incredible thing because that's also happening. But always a lot of fun.
So I think that this is probably what most people who are interested in non-traditional or offbeat weddings would like to hear about. Like, how do you market to couples who, for lack of a better term, like if they don't fit into a particular category?
Yeah, I think it's to some degree, it's figuring out how to define the undefinable category, right? And so thinking about are you the adventure offbeat photographer? Are you the person who is hiking and wants to climb a mountain at sunrise to photograph, a couple getting married on a cliff face? That
That's
is not me.
not me either.
um, I can do it and will do it for people I know and love, but I don't want to carry my camera bag at 4 a.m. to the top of a cliff face. So figuring out kind of what it is that you're doing that, and even if you haven't photographed the type of offbeat wedding that you want to do, there are ways to show that that is who you are. And I think that that's really the big part is finding what it is that is already a part of who you are and how you can connect to clients who also appreciate that. So for me, I was photographing a lot of belly dance events. I was photographing a lot of fire performance, and then people who are having belly dancers at their weddings, people who are having fire performance as part of their ceremony or part of their reception. They want someone who knows how to photograph it and also kind of knows the community and the subcultures that are associated with those. And so they don't feel weird or uncomfortable if they're like, hey, my friends are going to be spitting fire. Like, are you going to be standing 30 feet away and afraid of being, hit by fire? To this record, I have never been hit by fire. I've never been caught on fire. I've kicked a couple of fire darts away as people have been performing, but it's never been a danger.
Well, I think what you bring up there is really important, that you're kind of authentic in your, it's not like I'm just trying to reach out to people who are doing non-traditional or offbeat stuff just because I want to add that to my repertoire. It's that you have to have some sort of connection to it, or like, a genuine interest in it to like sort of attract those people. Like I did, it was weirdly enough, a wedding a couple of years ago for a guy who was a former like semi-professional wrestler and horror film producer. And it was just because I knew people in the horror film industry around the area that like he knew to contact me. And it was just like, that's just how that connection happened. And their wedding was very non-traditional, but it's, it's that sort of the guy who performed the ceremony, the friend of theirs performed the ceremony, came out like dressed as Macho Man Randy Savage. But it was, that came about because of a genuine connection to that community. And it's not just like I'm trying to make stuff up, or I'm gonna, I'm gonna do a styled shoot with like that's very offbeat, and like it just doesn't ring as authentic. I think is what is very important, especially to this particular subgenre of the wedding community.
Yeah, and I think that there's two levels to that, right? It's the first one is they need to trust you with who they are, and they need to trust you with the choices they're making in this, and that kind of goes back to the sort of high school days of being a nerd or being the weirdo, and trusting that you're not judging them like that, and that you're going to be able to celebrate and capture those things that make them unique and those things that are important to them in a way that is authentic and that really honors and represents them in those moments. And then there's sort of a second level to that that's even better is if they can trust that you are already familiar with it and they won't necessarily have to explain things to you. One of the stranger things that I discovered a couple years ago is that I'm actually pretty well known within the polyamorous community as a photographer for weddings. And I didn't know this until I was at a wedding and someone thanked me for the work that I had done in their community. I was like, I really don't know what you're talking about. And then their partner, who I was friends with, sort of explained it to me. I was like, oh, that's really cool. I didn't know that was a thing. I guess I need to figure out how to acknowledge that more broadly. And it was a word of mouth thing, but it just came from people having weddings that weren't, you know, talk about non-traditional, right? And so they're legally binding. It's just one couple getting married. I've never done any sort of triad ceremonies or anything, um, but it was people who were trusting me to be comfortable with if they have people in their wedding party who they might be dating, in addition to the person they're getting married to.
Yeah,
And
I
so,
mean, you have to be like it's that's a very specific niche, but it's like like that's something that they need to know that you're comfortable with.
yeah, exactly. And I will say that the first time I had a groom kiss someone who was in his wedding party and it hadn't been sort of pre-discussed as a thing, was a little bit of a shock, but then you just kind of go with it. But that kind of thing. And at one point, I switched up some wording on my website to be, photographing you and the people you love, or something like that, to kind of be more inclusive and sort of just different kind of nods to not having wording around, marriage is a man and a woman, or marriage
Right.
is like these two. Yeah,
I mean, it's a discussion of like inclusivity as well. Like like not having our words can be very not trying to think of a better way to say this. The language needs to be inclusive in that it's not so specific to like very traditional I don't know, I guess mainstream sort of weddings. If you want to like break into that, like or like expand into it or focus on it, you really need to think about the terminology that you're using in your social media, on your website, in all that sort of in all of that stuff.
for sure. Like if you want to become that adventure photographer that neither of us want to do, you're probably not going to say, going to the chapel, because you're probably not having a lot of couples who are going to be in a church. And kind of thinking through, if you're going to be offbeat, your words and your phrasing as well as your imagery needs to be able to reflect that as well.
Right. And to sort of reflect what we were talking about earlier with it, there are so many different sort of like subcultures amongst this sort of like offbeat category that sort of that's why it sort of defies like putting it into like one particular thing. It's you know if you want to focus on one of those, then you need to like sort of focus your language on that group, and if that's what you totally want your focus to be. Otherwise, you just need to have language that is completely inclusive of that and all of the different types of things that you're doing.
Yeah, for sure. And for me, a lot of the offbeat communities I work in, inclusivity is a huge thing. I have a couple who I actually ran into at a happy hour socially, I think 8 years after their wedding. And we were talking about something, and they said that part of why they hired me was they were asking anyone that they were talking to for their wedding. They were saying, we have members of our wedding party who are non-binary. Is that going to be like, how do you manage that? And my only question was, I just need to know what pronouns they want to use. Um, and
Exactly. And
uh,
my whole response to that is always like, I photograph them like any other person. They're a human being. Like there's, I want to address them how they want to be addressed. But also, like, when I've had people like, is that going to be a problem for you? And I'm like, no, it's not a problem. Like, they are who they are. And I'm going to, like, I want to showcase everybody, every guest's personality or, couple's personality and identity as they are. Not I'm not going to try to change that, or I'm not photographing them differently. I want their real persona, their personality, their identity, for lack of a better word.
yeah,
Sorry.
exactly. And I hate that it has to be a discussion. And I hate that that has to be something that people are asking about. Like, I wish that we were at a point where that was the standard. And if you're going to be a jerk about something, you have to say that. But unfortunately, that's not the case.
Yeah, and that's something that I've dealt with for a very long time when it comes to uh, sort of, I guess, non-traditional marriage, when I like same sex and various other types of weddings, where people have contacted me and said, this is what this wedding is going to be. Is that okay with you? And it really sort of saddens me when I hear that, because my guess is they're afraid. They're afraid that, whoever they're contacting is going to say, no, I'm not okay with that. Like, and I want them to feel comfortable and say, yeah, it's okay to be whoever you are, and I'm going to photograph that love and what you have, and I'm there to document that love.
100%. And that comes back again to the sort of trust, and not even, I mean, people don't want someone who's going to tolerate them on their wedding day, right? Like, you want someone who celebrates, enjoys, is happy for you and who you are. Um, yeah, and it's, people love to blame that as, it's a country thing or it's a rural thing. But I mean, I have friends in Baltimore who are wedding photographers who are gay and were looking for venues, and they had venues that turned them away as soon as they saw that it was two women's names on an email. So, still happening in cities, and still happening to wedding photographers, to people in the wedding industry. It's ridiculous, but I think that's part of why the offbeat market has sort of blown up the way that it has. And that you do have, it used to be what, like, only Offbeat Bride was sort of the big one, then a practical wedding kicked in, and just more and more and more offbeat weddings, boho weddings, etc., because people are really looking for events that focus on who they are, and vendors who are happy to celebrate who they are and not try to force them to fit into the certain box and the certain niche of what a wedding is supposed to look like, quote unquote.
Yeah, there are many more. I remember, like, it was, Offbeat Bride was sort of like the beginning of that, and Rock and Roll Bride was kind of like similar in some ways, just like very different types of weddings, and then had been sort of the mainstream. And there are places, like, for photographers or other wedding vendors who are looking to, like, expand into that market. Like, if you have, you want to, like, reach those people, find those publications, those blogs or whatever out there, and, like, that's where you want to be, like, sort of targeting things. If that's the groups that you want to target, like, that's where you need to be, because that's probably where your potential clients are going to be. That's where the places they're going to look. So what advice, as opposed to what we've already covered, what additional advice would you have for wedding photographers who'd like to get into non-traditional or offbeat weddings?
Yeah, I think it's figure out what kind of non-traditional and offbeat weddings you're into. Are you adventure? Are you, um, dark and spooky kind of thing? Are you boho? Think about those kind of things, and think about who you are in reference to that as well. And then think about how your current representation reflects that. Have you been trying to fit into, I cater to everyone? Have you been trying to fit into, I am a wedding photographer who is used to, churches and ballrooms, and now I want to go be in a sand dune with you? And kind of think about how you can frame what you want, and what you want to be doing in with the work that you already have to show, and then with your words. And you can get into styled shoots. I think if you look for it, and if you are truly able to represent offbeat markets, I think that you can usually find work that isn't just a styled shoot, to do that. And that might just be that I've been lucky in that respect. So I think that if the only way you can show that you're offbeat is through setting up styled shoots, then there's sort of a disconnect elsewhere. But kind of a couple, or like one or two to get you going, may not be a bad way. And, like, for that, connect with vendors. If you're into offbeat, look through Etsy and see if there's someone local to you who's doing an aesthetic that you're really into, and see if you can collaborate on shooting dresses or shooting, accessories, that kind of thing. And then you've got something that is your work in the aesthetic you're trying to drive to. And then just be really honest about what you want to be doing, and how it connects to your life, and show some of your personal connections to it. If you're outdoorsy, use Instagram stories to show your hiking, use Twitter to show that you were at, the Appalachian Trail, last week and it was gorgeous or whatever. I booked a wedding because I was traveling in the UK and I posted with, hashtag travel photo, and someone found it through that. And then they realized that while my picture was in Ireland, I was actually based in Baltimore and they were getting married outside of Baltimore. And it was just those weird little connections can draw people to you. So I think show your real life, figure out how it connects to the kind of work you want to be doing, and then just show it off.
Yeah, having a genuine connection to whatever culture or connection there is to this whatever non-traditional sect of the market that you're looking to cater to or be a part of is very helpful. For me, I kind of laughed when you mentioned it, like dark and spooky. That tends to be like the people who come to me because I have a love of Halloween that is just that maybe a little overboard. But I would always like post a lot of stuff on my Instagram around Halloween, and I write a series of Halloween haikus every October for the entire month of October. So I was finding like people would come to me like, we're doing like a sort of like Halloween-y, like horror film, like weird non-traditional wedding. And so that's how I sort of connected to those people, which they understood that I had a connection to what they loved from what I had already been putting out there. It wasn't something I was just like putting on like a face to try to sell myself.
That's amazing. I'm going to have to go back and find some of those Halloween haikus.
It's a whole other Instagram now. Because I was realizing that there were some issues like, like people were like, be authentic in your Instagram, but it's like every day in October, like it was becoming a thing. So now I have a solo Instagram for Halloween haiku, which is I'm throwing out stuff at also other times of the year. Which I'm also doing rooms on Clubhouse where I like write haikus for people.
That's fantastic. I feel like I've started using Instagram and Facebook stories more for that kind of thing. I know a lot of people who use it for sharing work and redirecting to feed posts, but I think it's also a really great place to be able to share like the haikus. Or the Baltimore Sun does really, really amazing Baltimore and Maryland focused Valentines every February. So I went through and reshared a couple of those in my Facebook and Instagram stories right now, just kind of personality and connecting to the city and kind of the quirkiness that is Baltimore. These Valentines are very well known for anyone around here. So more ways to connect to your niche.
That's awesome. Yeah, I totally put everything in it now into my stories for the haikus. I share it to the stories as well because it's just like, it's not necessarily something to do all the time, but it's definitely part of who I am.
I have one last piece of advice real quick before we do that. Right. We mentioned Offbeat Bride, Rock and Roll, and A Practical Wedding earlier. And like, if you're looking for marketing for non-traditional weddings, I will, for myself, for my business, Offbeat Bride and A Practical Wedding have absolutely been worth the investment 50 times over. They are so much cheaper than not and have given me much better return on investment. And clients I've really enjoyed working with. So if you're looking for something that is really like concrete, nailed down, can do a thing, highly recommend those.
Excellent. That's always good to hear, like people who are getting return on the investment of advertising, because there's so many places where you just like feel like you're just throwing money out there and hoping that someone actually sees your ad.
Looking for a podcast all about nerddom?
Want a podcast with an emphasis on representation?
The Nerd Alternative is the podcast for you. Join me, Ram.
Me, Hassan.
And me, Levi.
3 black British nerds tackling the pop culture we love and sharing why we love them. The Nerd Alternative, a sweet melting pot of all things nerdy.
Hey, and now for my favorite part of the show. What's that say? Useless information. This is always death.
Devon, did you know that 1/3 of all ice cream produced is vanilla?
I did not know that, but I appreciate it. I really think vanilla is the way to test the quality of an ice cream brand.
I was having this conversation actually yesterday with a group of people. They were saying, like, it's much like a pizza place or ice cream, whatever. You judge it based on the simplest thing. You judge based on the vanilla ice cream for, either it's a brand or an ice cream shop. Because if you can't make vanilla, you're definitely not going to be able to make anything else taste good. It's much like having a plain slice of cheese pizza. It's, if you judge a pizza place based on that, because if they can't make a plain cheese slice, then it doesn't matter what the toppings are.
Absolutely.
Well, you better start listening. 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 Better start listening.
Welcome back. I managed to explain to the locals in this dimension that Gulden was not disrespecting their culture. He just doesn't have the correct appendages to wear their traditional outfits.
Snug.
I know. Maybe someday, buddy. I'd like to thank Devon Rowland for joining us again. You can find Devon on Facebook and Instagram at Devon Rowland Photography or on her website, devonrowland.com. And all these links are in the podcast notes and description as well. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, leave a review, and tell a friend about the show. We're always looking for new listeners. You can find The Nerdy Photographer on Instagram, Twitter, Reddit, and TikTok at The Nerdy Photo. That's right. I finally gave in and created a TikTok. Should be fun. Check us out over there.
Snug?
No, I won't make you prosthetic tentacles.
Snug.
I'm not going to do it. It's not happening. Until next time, everybody, stay safe and stay nerdy.
Who's that coming back to town? You better start listening. Who's your heart been beating about? You better listen.